Excellent. All right, so let's take a look at the solution to this exercise. So our first um, goal was to set up some rules using Zod. Okay, so I'm going to come over here, check out my main branch, and inside of validators.ts, here is where I want to describe what each of the different values of my form should look like. Typically, when you're validating an object or excuse me, a form in Zod, it's going to include multiple values, right? And so I found that z.object is the best way to handle this. So you just basically have a form represented by an object, and the different fields in that form are the keys. Okay, so that means I need an email key, right? And it looks like Copilot is being really eager here and helping me out. So that's great. It's not doing everything for me, but it's getting some things right. So I expect this to be a string. I expect it to be a valid email. And I know these work. One, because if I just start typing here, I can, see that my IDE can complete this stuff for me. So that's one way of going about figuring out, what I can use from Zod. The other way, of course, is you could go directly over to the Zod docs if you're brand new to Zod. But after you begin using it for a while, you kind of get used to what's available, right? So you can just keep rolling with it. I also want to do a password here. And I think in my instructions, I said it should be a minimum of 6 characters. Let's see. So email should be a string. That's a valid email address and doesn't already exist. So we handled most of that. We haven't handled the doesn't already exist part yet. Let's save that for a few moments later. My password should be a string of at least 6 characters. Awesome. Copilot got that right. I guess it's reading into my solution branch a little bit. Or somehow the world is going crazy and it's actually connected to the Notion document. Who knows? Copilot is insane. All right, so no, it's the solution branch. So now age should be at least a positive number that is at least 16. So now we're going to do age. It should be a number. Okay, and it should be a minimum of 18. Okay, and then I also mentioned that it should be positive. To be honest, that doesn't really matter because it's going to be a minimum of 18 anyway, and anything at a min of 18 is already positive. But just so you're aware that there is a rule here that you can use in Zod to say, hey, it has to be a positive or a negative number. That's helpful. Okay, great. So we have our rules basically set up now, except for the rest of the email. Let's see how we can use this on the client side in the form. So if I come over to the FormKit Zod plugin docs, it will show me how to use the Zod plugin. So right here, you would import create plugin Zod. Let's see if I can get rid of what is this called? Grammarly or whatever is all up in the way. Okay, that's all right. So import create Zod plugin from FormKit Zod. So the point of this plugin is to teach FormKit how to understand Zod validation. By default, FormKit has its own validation rules defined, but we want to use Zod to write those rules instead. So that's the point of this plugin. And the way we create the plugin is by calling this function that's imported. So that looks like right here. Okay, so it looks like we call it. We provide it the Zod schema. So that's the thing we just wrote, right? And then we provided a second callback function, which is the handler. So this will be where we actually make an AJAX request and do something with the data, right? So let's just go ahead and do that. Let's do this piece, and then we'll work with what comes out of it. All right, so over in app.view, right here, I'm going to call create Zod plugin. I have already imported it. Now, one thing to note here is that I actually did, I went to their GitHub repo, FormKit's GitHub repo, and I copied and pasted the code for the actual Zod plugin, and I made one important change. That important change, so if you look over here in utils, And let's look for safe parse. So the one important change I made was I changed this right here to from safe parse to safe parse async. That just allowed me to do the refine method, the validation about the email already exists correctly, because I had to do some async logic there. So do make note of that. I have submitted an issue with the GitHub repo for FormKit to see if they can allow this officially and just change this to safe parse async. But for now, we just kind of had to manually change that out. Okay, so we've called create Zod plugin. Now we need to pass for the callback function. For now, let's just leave it as this dummy stuff, right? Okay, it looks like I need to provide a. Ooh, what have I done wrong here? Let me copy this again. Create Zod plugin. I was missing parenthesis, I think. Yeah, that's better. There's the Zod schema. This is that register validator. That looks better. And this is just red squiggly because submit handler is twice. I see. Okay. So the two things that come out of the Zod plugin are the submit handler, so the new function that runs, which is defined as the second argument here. So now I just need to pass this to my submit function, which is actually already done. So we can get rid of this one here. And the next thing that comes out of the create Zod plugin function is the actual plugin itself. So in order to tell FormKit about the plugin, what does it say in the docs? We just pass a plugins prop, and it's an array of plugins. So here I'll do plugins equals the array of the Zod plugin. Great. Okay, so back in my browser, now things should start getting a little interesting. This is the beauty of FormKit. I love their smartness about when they display these error messages. So right now, no errors are displayed. But if I focus on this and then blur it, you'll notice that now immediately my errors, my validation is occurring. So it's FormKit just provides these smart like defaults out of the box. So now I just need to provide a valid email, test@test.com, and it goes away. Great. So everything here is working. Notice here that my password, though, string must be at least 6 characters. String, that's not the greatest user experience. Like a normal everyday user doesn't know what the word string means. So can we actually customize these messages that Zod is automatically generating for us? Well, yeah, we can. The way we customize the message is via an options object on the rule that's being applied. And then it just takes a message property. So for here, I'll change the message to password must be at least 6 characters long. That's a lot nicer for our end users. Let's do the same thing for the age. We can say the message is you must be at least 18 years old. That sounds good. Okay, and for email, the email validation already makes sense. It must be a valid email, right? Invalid email. Yeah, that still reads fine. So now, though, password must be at least 6 characters long. This is great. What is my next step? We have the client-side validation working. Now, I'm gonna hold off on the async email stuff, checking to see if it already exists. I'm gonna save that to the end. But now let's go and see if we can get the server side using this same validator. So what do I mean by that? Well, right now, if I open up my request here, and I make a request to /API/register, but I don't provide this valid stuff, let's see what happens. So I'm just going to get rid of that so it has no payload. Send the request. You'll see it goes 204 no content. That's interesting. Let's throw this back in here and let's just omit these two. I'm really looking for a 200. It's still getting no content. I guess that's just because I'm not actually returning anything from the request, right? So let's go here and take a look register post. So yeah, I'm never doing anything at all with it, right? Okay. So let's go and actually do something in register.post. So I'll pull this way just a little bit. So the idea here is that we need to first capture the body of the request. That is over here. That is the JSON that's being sent in. Okay. We need to capture that first in order to validate it. Well, in Nuxt, we can do that with a function from H3 called read validated body. Okay. So we could also do read body. Just pass the event, and this would grab the body of the request. So like that. But read validated body gives us this nice hook to actually pass a callback function to validate it first. So whatever we pass to read validated body here, I think as long as it doesn't throw an error, then it's considered valid, or if it doesn't return false. So that's what this safe parse async does. So I've imported register validator right up here from the exact same place that we imported it in the front end in app.view, right? So I'm using the same exact rules. And then I pass I call safe parse async. I call safe parse async because eventually we will have to use that refine rule to validate whether the email exists or not. But I could also do safe parse here for now. I think that would work as well. But the thing is this automatically gets past the body. And it's going to check those rules, compare it to the rules. And if the rules fail, then it's going to throw an error. And then our read validated body is going to return unsuccessfully. Okay. So here I'll say the response of this should be await. We need to await it because it is an async function, right? So our response is safe parse success. It looks like it's the actual body now, right? So let's grab that, and I'll just return it so I can make sure I know what I'm looking at. Okay, so this is where the beauty of these come in. I can just hit send request real quick and very quickly see the result of what I'm returning, right? So this says success false. I've got an invalid type. So this should be a number. This should be a number. So interesting thing here is I can actually coerce this to be a number. This is really a string, but I mean, I'm a human and I can see this is also a number, right? It's just not the data type number. So inside of my validators, I can actually let it be a little bit more liberal and coerce those string numbers into real numbers. So here in my age, I'm going to say z dot coerce. And this is going to coerce that into a real number. Now, when I make my request, which now I have valid, all this is valid now, right? Okay, so now I get success true and I get the actual data. So it looks like the return of read validated body is not actually the body. It's just this response object, you could say, or that's really a request object, you could say, that has either success true or false on it and the data. So let's break that out. We've got success, and look at there, TypeScript knows. And we've got data, which I'm going to call the body. Okay, great. So our next step then is to, let's see, I added some little to-dos for us down here. So we already took care of that. So the next thing I want to do is I just want to throw a 422 error code if the validation was not successful. This is a fairly common error code for indicating that that a payload failed a validation. All right. This is what they do in Laravel. It's kind of what I've copied for Nuxt. I'm not sure if there's an actual like precedence here, to be honest, about what error codes you should throw when validation fails, but this is what we did in Laravel, and it works great. So I'm going to say if not success, then I'm going to throw create error. Look at Copilot is so smart. I'm going to pass it a 422 error code, but it got this wrong. The second option should be an object, an options object, and it should have a message. Is it an options object? Create error. Oh, the whole thing. It got the whole thing wrong, and it made me believe it. The status should be, and it's just the whole object. It's the whole options object. Status 422. It should have a message. We can say invalid payload. But here's the really cool part. We can also pass the data back to tell our front end exactly what failed. So this body right here, in the case of a invalid payload, is going to be an array of more data explaining why it failed, right? So let's take this back to something invalid. So let's make this an invalid email. Okay. And then I'm going to send it. Okay, cool. So notice here that we have URL. We got a status message. Where is my data? That is not right. Oh, I know what it is. Okay. So in the case that it actually fails, the data, which I've renamed body, is actually empty. And it's an error object which contains all of the errors. That makes more sense. So our data should be the errors. And I send the request again. Yeah, here you can see in our data, here are the issues with our payload. What failed? The email. Why? Because it's an invalid email. Okay, we do the same thing for age. Let me just get rid of age over here. Send it again. Okay, now we have both issues within our array, right? And there we have that wonderful message, expected number, received, not a number. Great. Okay, and we did specify the message just on the min rule. So that's why we don't see the must be at least 18. We see the default message for it not being a number at all. Okay, so if I were to pass 1 and send it again, yeah, now we have you must be at least 18 years or older. So this is super cool. Now we have created validation rules for both our API endpoint and for our front end at the exact same time. They run in different places, so they are timely in both different places, and yet we don't have to manage them separately. We only had to write them once. This is great. Okay, so let me check to see how much time I have left. And let's finish off the thing we should do here. It says finally just return the validated payload. We aren't actually saving in anything to a database. In a real life application, this is where you would go and actually register your user, right? So, but what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to return the body. Why not? And so for our invalid requests, we get a 422 status code, and we get the errors explained for us. So for a user the API, we know what to do. But if I pass a valid body, then we just get the validated body passed back to us. Awesome. And notice by the way, this is actually a number now. So it's that coercion actually coerces it to a real number, not just for validation, but for use in your backend code. Now you can actually work with the thing in register.post. You can actually work with this body as the proper types now, which is great. Okay, so that takes care of most everything within this exercise. We've got client-side stuff working. We've got server-side stuff working. Now on the client side, in our callback handler, what we probably really want to do is, make a request to that register endpoint. So /API/register, we want to pass it that form data, right? No, that should be body form data, and that should be method of post. Okay, awesome. And then we would do, whatever. It really doesn't matter at this point. And some of you at this point might be asking, well, what was the point of validating the data on the server side in the API endpoint if I'm validating it here in the form first? Because after all, the form is never going to call this API endpoint if it doesn't complete the validation client side first, right? Well, that's true. We've doubled up our efforts, kind of. But here's the thing: this API endpoint, nope, not that one. This API endpoint might be called from other places, and it's really not the responsibility of the client of code that runs in the browser to validate the payloads for our API endpoint. Why? Because some requests to that API endpoint might bypass the browser step altogether. So as a good backend developer, I know this is Frontend Nation, but a lot of us here probably full stack, which is why you want to choose Nuxt. It's always good practice to make sure you're validating your API endpoints on the server side, because that's what you control. That's the world that you completely control, right? So validating on the client side is about user experience. Validating on the server side is about clean data. Okay. What else did we have to do now? So coming back to the exercise document. So we use the Zod rules to validate form on the client. We use the same rules on the server. We need to come back to the email. We need to check, does it already exist or not? Great. So unfortunately, this is something that only the server knows. The client doesn't know this. It doesn't have access to all the emails that already exist on our system, right? And it shouldn't. It shouldn't. So what we need to do inside of our validation is we need to add a new rule on email called refine. So refine is a really flexible rule in Zod. It basically allows you to define a callback function and then validate however you desire. So that callback function will receive the value of the input, in this case, the email address that was entered. Okay. And then inside of here, we can make this async so that we can go back to our server now and check with another API endpoint, does a certain email exist or not? And wow, it's trying to use Prisma here. That's not what I want to do, because that certainly won't run on the client side. So instead, what I want to do is I want to call fetch. Let me comment that out for just a moment. Come back over to my requests and notice that there is an API endpoint already available for you called user exists. All right, it takes an email query parameter, and when we send that, we get back an object saying whether or not the user exists or not. So it looks like test@dc.com doesn't exist because we get exists false. But if we send batman@dc.com, we get exists true. So that's the way that API endpoint works. So what I want to do is call that API endpoint. I want to pass it the email. I could do that directly here inside of the string. However, Nuxt provides a better way with fetch, so we can work with our query parameters in a more JavaScript-friendly way. That is via an object. Just checking my time there. Okay, so I want to say our query email should be the email that the user typed into the input. Okay, we could shorten this to just email here, since the key and the property or the key and the value are the same name. Okay, so I want to await the result of that. So I'll get the response. And from that response, actually, I can destructure my exists keyword. Okay, so what you return from refine is basically true or false based on whether or not it's valid or not. So returning true means it is valid. Returning false means it's not valid. So I want to return the Boolean of not exists. So this is valid only when the email doesn't already exist. The one last thing I want to do here to scope this refine rule to really only be checking if the email exists or not is I want to check, is the email passed by the user? Is it even there? Or did they pass nothing at all? If they passed nothing at all, I just want to return true, because that's not really what this rule is checking. This rule is meant to check whether or not the email exists or not. It's not meant to check, is it empty or not? Okay. If I come back over here And now I type in, what was one that existed? So Batman at dc.com already exists. By the way, let me come back to the user exists endpoint, just so you know. This is actually using the exact same validation as we set up ourselves for the other endpoint. It uses get validated query instead of read validated body, because this is a query string instead of the post body, right? So it uses the exact same validation. All we're doing is we're just hard coding in these existing emails. In a real life application, this would come from the database, right? Okay, so now I'll enter a valid email. Batman at dc.com. We're getting invalid input. I wonder why that is. What have I done? What have I done? Invalid input. Let's come right here. So if it doesn't exist, then we're all good, right? Yeah, that's right. Let's console.log exists here. And let's just customize the message on this one so that I make sure it's this rule that's actually failing. Okay, give the page a nice refresh. Don't worry about these errors right here. This is my last pass, I think. This might be an issue. I'm not sure what that is. But let's try Batman at dc.com. Yeah, it says email already exists. Oh, that's right, because it. Yeah, I'm an idiot. This is the point of validation, is to keep people on their toes. So yes, this already exists. The message is correct. So what doesn't exist is test. Oh, last pass, you're killing me. Is test at dc.com. So that doesn't already exist. So perfect. Okay, so it's working as expected. Got about 5 minutes left here. We're basically done with the exercise at this point, but I want to show you one more really helpful thing that I've found to do with Zod and forms. So one useful thing in your web app might be to actually pre-fill out your forms based on the query string in the URL for the page that's visited. For instance, if I were to come up here to localhost 3000 and do email equals test at, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.com. Okay. It'd be really nice if I could pre-fill out my email with that value. So what I could do here inside of my app.view, this is a bonus, y'all. This is just some extra info for you. So what I could do is I could call use route, grab the route, okay, and then I could actually call this register validator. Well, actually, let me do it without it first. I could do route.query.email or an empty string. So I'm setting route.query.email to an empty string, or to the default value for the email in the form. So now when I refresh the page, yeah, we do in fact get test I don't know as the default value for this field. But if I change this to something that's invalid, so if I change it to a number 123, that comes down in there too. And that's not great, right? I only want to accept valid default values here. So what I could do is I could say register, what is it? The register validator, safe parse, everything in my query string. So that would be route.query. Okay. Now I can get just the valid, pre-pops out of here. So now I can say the email on my form defaults to the email. I don't want to change all that. Like this. There we go. Does email already exist? Why is it saying? Oh, I see. Yeah, that's TypeScript being overly picky. Is because it might not exist in the query. I could handle that, but I'm not going to for the time being. We're just going to leave it like that for now because I believe they're going to be undefined if they're just not in the query. So let's just ignore that for now. So we'll do password we're defaulting to the password from the query string, or we're getting the age from the query string, or 0. Okay, awesome. So now async refinement encountered during what in the world? That's safe parse. What is it doing here? Use parse async instead. So because I have that refine in there that is doing an async operation, I need to use safe parse async instead of safe parse. So if any of your rules include some async rules, then you need to use safe parse async instead. Okay. Okay, great. So notice this time that email does not show up in the email field because I didn't provide a valid email in the query string. Now, if I do provide a valid email, still doesn't work. What's going on? So look at my console. Let's email route.query. Let's console.log email. Yeah, let's console log all of them. What have I done? We've got undefined, undefined, undefined. Email equals test. I don't know. What is the problem? Safe. Let's do this. Let's just get the res here, or the validated data, maybe we could call it that. I think TypeScript actually was maybe keeping me on my toes properly, and I was just being an idiot. So let's get rid of these. So I have a love-hate relationship with TypeScript. Sometimes it tells me things inaccurately, and I trust it, and things go wrong. And then sometimes the opposite happens. What have I done? What have I done? Console.log. Attribute cannot contain. No. Create compiler error. My time is technically up, but let me see if I can fix this real quickly, y'all. I think you get the idea of this this approach that I'm taking. No, it's still bad. Register parse, console log, const validated data. What did I do? I do not see what my issue is. ESLint disable validated data. Let me just remove that from the query string, see if it did anything else. No, that is weird. Okay. Well, that's, oh. I need to await that, don't I? No? Okay, fun. That's the way the live coding goes. Man, I wanted that to work. Yeah, Jen, sorry.
I'm like,
sorry, unmuting
like
you.
You're almost there.
I feel like you're almost there.
Yeah. So I'm like, just.
Or this, because
Yeah. So hopefully we get there.
Yeah, it does not work, but that's okay. Let's take questions. I think you get the idea. Is let me say one more thing. So
I was like, let's give it like 5 more minutes. Let's do like 5 more minutes. See if you can get there.
You know, validated data. I'm looking through here. Oh, I see what stuff has happened down here that I did not mean to happen down here. Okay, 5 more minutes. I can do it. I don't know what happened here. Okay, so this is going to be, thank you, Jen. So this should be, oh no, there has got to be a, y'all can watch me struggle bus. By the way, I'm going to check Discord. Does anybody see what I'm doing in Discord? This is always the fun stuff. Okay, no, nobody sees what I'm doing in Discord either. It's all good. But yeah, I'm getting unexpected. Why is that unexpected form? Aha, the label. Something about the label screwed up. There it is. This is why code sometimes just sucks. Great. Now we're back. Okay, so now if I do my email, and I've got the console log here, we've got success is false, right? Because email is test, I don't know. Why is success false? That doesn't already exist, right? Test, I don't know. Oh, because we didn't pass all the things. I see, I see, I see. Okay. So if we had age up here as well, it's 18, and password, that's not something we should pre-fill, right? Um, okay, so this time we've got success true. Great. So I didn't rehearse this part, by the way, and you can tell. But what we need to do then, I guess, is really say that this should be partial. This should only be a partial thing. So let's say the request register validator dot partial. Let's try that. Okay, so this means I don't care about every single property in the object, right? Just validate the ones that I actually did, come through. And so here we have success true. Great. So success is true because email is actually an email. If I change it to an invalid email, just something like test, we still get six. Oh, it went back to it pre-filled here. Okay, great. So now we get a 422 that this is unprocessable. So this is where I need to refine that refine statement probably just a little bit more. But let's do the age instead. That might be a better example. Okay, so age is 10. Here we go. Yeah, success is false, right? Because it's not greater than 18. But when we get it at 18, success is true. That's awesome. So that means now I can pre-fill my form with valid data. So out of this, I'm going to get the data. And from the data, let's not make TypeScript mad. From the data, I'm going to say data.email or that. So if the data.email exists, then data.password or that. Okay. And then finally, we can do data.age or that. Awesome. Okay, so that allows me to pre-fill out my my form this way. But see, another really cool thing about this is that this age, if I console log that, this is actually a number now. So notice here we don't have the quotation marks around 18. So this is another really handy thing about validating the data from the query string is I can coerce it in that one place in the validation place, and then I can actually work with it with real JavaScript, in the actual good JavaScript type throughout my file. All right, y'all, that is it.
You did it. Yay. I always get nervous about live coding too. So that's why no matter what, because something will happen. All right.
Absolutely.
So, questions. And I saw you did get one in Discord. We're not actively checking those. So if anybody has questions and we didn't grab it, put it in Slido in the main stage area. But the one we got from Discord, and we had a couple others, was, do you personally use Zod and FormKit or different form validation solutions?
So this is an excellent question. I am currently working on a Nuxt project, a production Nuxt project, where I do use FormKit for my forms and Zod for my backend validation. I haven't tried this approach in a production level yet. What I have done in that project is I have doubled up on my my validations, unfortunately. So I use the built-in FormKit validation rules on my FormKit forms, and I use my Zod schemas on my API endpoints. But now I have to manage my rules in two different places, right? Which sucks, which is what led me to this version. They didn't have the Zod plugin for FormKit when I first started this project. And so, yeah, eventually I do want to switch it to this strategy.
Very cool. All right, couple more. Will this approach work with Valibot?
Yeah, so Valibot is an alternate library to Zod that provides the same kind of rules and everything that Zod does. The only difference is it's tree shakeable. Like each rule. So when you use Zod in your projects, you're going to import the entire Zod library, unfortunately, even if you don't use every rule. So Valibot is just a tree shakeable version of Zod. I bet it would work a lot the same. Someone will just have to write a Valibot plugin for FormKit, which I dare say you could fork the, you could fork the Zod one and be halfway there. So yeah, I think it probably would work. There's just no out of the box solution for it right now.
And I think this adds on to the one you just answered, but do they have to use FormKit to take advantage of this approach?
No, absolutely not. You don't have to. You could run the Zod validations yourself, like inside of a, just a callback function or something whenever somebody inputs something in your form. It's just that FormKit makes it so much easier. It just handles the when stuff, when do the callbacks run to validate something? When do I display the message? Things like that. It just so many things you don't have to handle yourself anymore.
And I feel like I want to add to this question of like every approach will have limitations, but are there other ways you would have you thought about going about this?
Sure. The other way you could go about this is just defining your rules in two places, which isn't ideal. I think the biggest limitation to this approach of actually using Zod is the fact that you do import the entire Zod library into your front end, into your client side code, even if you don't use all the rules. So it is a little bit heavy, but something like Valibot could definitely help make that better, and it's very similar.
Very cool. Well, thank you, Daniel, so much for your time today and putting together Forge. It's amazing, and thank you again, Daniel.
Thanks, Jen.